She was 17 years old. Her father had been dead for exactly 31 days, and the woman who called herself her stepmother had just locked the front door behind her. On a Tuesday night in the middle of October, with $55 in her pocket and nowhere on earth to go, her name was Clara Whitmore. 3 weeks later, cold and hungry and out of options, she spent 10 of those precious dollars on a dusty storage unit at a roadside auction. She wasn't looking for treasure. She was looking for anything she could sell. A lamp, a chair, a box of forks, just enough to buy one more night indoors. But when she stepped inside that little metal room and looked up, she saw something taped to the ceiling. Something small, something yellow, something with her own name written on it in handwriting she hadn't seen since she was 6 years old. The handwriting of a grandmother she'd been told for 10 long years had abandoned her. What Clara found inside that envelope didn't just change her life. It rewrote every single thing she thought she knew about her family. Her father and the woman she'd cried herself to sleep, hating night after night for a decade. If you've ever felt forgotten by the people who were supposed to love you the most, stay with me, because this story is going to break your heart, and then it's going to put it back together piece by piece. Rain started an hour before the funeral ended. Not a real rain, just a thin, mean drizzle. The kind that soaks through your coat before you notice it's falling. The kind that makes cemetery grass smell like old pennies. Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of her father's grave with her hands folded in front of her, 17 years old, black dress from a thrift store 2 blocks from the funeral home, shoes half a size too small. She hadn't cried yet. She was waiting for permission. From who she didn't know. The priest said something about ashes, something about dust, something about a good man who was loved. She kept her eyes on the coffin. I was there. He was inside that box. Her father, the man who used to burn pancakes on Sunday mornings and blame the pan. The man who kept a Polaroid of her second-grade school play in his wallet for 10 years, even after it faded so bad you couldn't see her face anymore. He was in that box, and she was standing here in shoes that hurt. Behind her, she could feel Marlene watching. Her stepmother. Perfect posture, perfect black hat, perfect leather gloves she'd bought that morning, still smelling like the department store bag. Marlene hadn't cried either, but Marlene had a reason. Clara didn't know it yet. The priest finished. People started to move. A few distant cousins she hadn't seen since she was 9 mumbled something and shuffled toward their cars. An old man from her father's printing shop squeezed her shoulder and said, "He was proud of you, sweetheart." She nodded because that's what you do. Then Marlene's hand touched her elbow. Light, cold. "Time to go," Marlene said. Clara looked up at her. For a second, she thought she saw something. A softness. A crack. But no, Marlene's eyes were dry, flat, already thinking about the drive home. They walked to the car together, side by side, like two strangers who happened to be leaving the same building. That was 31 days ago. Oh, it was a Tuesday night in October, almost 9. Clara was sitting on her bed reading a paperback she'd found in her father's closet. Her bedroom door opened without a knock. Marlene stood in the doorway. She had a small suitcase in her hand. Clara's suitcase. The one with the broken zipper. It was already packed. Clara looked at it, then at Marlene, then at the suitcase again. "What is that?" she said. Not a question, not really. "I need you to leave tonight." "What?" "I said I need you to leave tonight." "Leave where?" "That's not my concern." Clara laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. It surprised her. "Marlene, I'm 17. I'm aware. I don't have anywhere. You'll figure something out." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Clara." Marlene took a breath. She looked at the ceiling for a moment like she was counting to 3. Then she looked back down. "You don't belong here. You never did." The words dropped into the room like stones into a well. Clara stood up slowly. She walked to the suitcase. She unzipped it. 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, underwear, a toothbrush, her old winter coat from 9th grade that didn't fit anymore. Nothing that was hers. She walked to her dresser and opened the top drawer. She reached in and took out 3 things. A photograph of her and her father at the county fair when she was 5. He was holding her up on his shoulders. She had cotton candy on her chin, a small silver necklace with a leaf pendant, old, tarnished. It had come in the mail on her 7th birthday, wrapped in tissue paper with no return address. She had known who it was from anyway, in an envelope with $55 she'd been saving from her weekend job at the coffee shop. She put all three in the pocket of her coat. She picked up the suitcase. She walked past Marlene without looking at her. She went down the stairs. She opened the front door, and she stepped out into the cold October dark. The door clicked shut behind her. Then she heard the deadbolt turn, not once, twice. Clara stood on the porch for a full minute, just breathing, watching her breath make little ghosts in the air. Then she started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to move. Because if she stopped, she would sit down on the sidewalk and never get up again. The first week she stayed at the bus station. It was warm. Nobody bothered her if she looked busy. She kept a book open on her lap and pretended to read. By the second week, the station guard started giving her looks. She moved to the library. There was a librarian named Mrs. Prescott who never said anything but always slid a granola bar across the desk when Clara came in. Clara ate the granola bars slowly, one bite, then 20 minutes, then another bite. She was learning how to make food last. At night, she slept in a 24-hour diner off the highway. She ordered coffee at 11 and made it last until 3. The waitress, a woman with a cough and tired eyes, brought her free refills and never asked questions. Once the waitress leaned down and said quietly, "Honey, there's a shelter on Grove Street, just so you know." Clara nodded. She didn't go. She was afraid of shelters. She was 17 and small and scared, and she didn't trust anyone she didn't already know, which wasn't many people. By the 3rd week, she was down to $8. She had learned things she never wanted to learn. She learned which church basements gave out sandwiches on Wednesday afternoons. She learned that if you wash your hair in a gas station sink at 4 in the morning, nobody says anything. She learned that hunger doesn't feel like hunger after a while. It feels like a low buzz behind your eyes, a hum. She learned that when you are invisible, some people look right through you, and some people look at you too long. The second kind was worse. That was when she met Otis. He ran a little bread cart on the corner of 5th and Bramwell, right by the courthouse. An old man, 60s, maybe 70s. His hands shook a little when he counted change. He wore the same wool cap, everyday gray, with a hole in the side that he'd sewn shut with black thread. Clara passed his cart every morning on her way to the library. She never bought anything. One Tuesday, she was walking past and Otis said, "Miss." She stopped. He held out a warm roll wrapped in wax paper. "On the house," he said. "I can't." "You can." "I don't have money for miss. Take the bread." She took it. She ate it standing there right in front of him because she couldn't wait. She was ashamed of how fast she ate it. She was ashamed of the tears that came without warning. Otis pretended not to see. He handed her a napkin. "Come back tomorrow," he said. Same time. She came back. She came back every day for a week. On the 8th day, she finally said, "I'm Clara." "Tis," he said. On the 11th day, he asked her a question. "You got anywhere to go, Clara?" She shook her head. He nodded like he'd already known. Then he said, "You ever heard of a storage auction?" "No." "They cut the locks off units when folks stop paying. Sell what's inside, sight unseen, sometimes junk, sometimes tools you can flip, sometimes furniture. I don't have money for $10 sometimes less." Clara did the math in her head. $8. She could maybe get to 10 by Saturday. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. Otis looked at her for a long second. "Because people leave more behind than you'd think, kid." He didn't explain what he meant. He handed her another roll. "Saturday morning, 9 sharp, place called Redstone Storage, bus 12, get off at Miller Road." Saturday came cold, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. Clara got off the bus at Miller Road with her suitcase in one hand and 10 crumpled dollars in the other. Redstone Storage was a rectangle of gravel and metal at the edge of town. rows of orange doors, a chain-link fence. There were maybe 15 people there, all men, all older, all in Carhartt jackets and work boots, all with the same look, bored, calculating. Clara stood at the back and tried not to be seen. The auctioneer was a heavy-set man in a plaid coat. He had a voice like a chainsaw. He carried bolt cutters in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Unit after unit, some full, some almost empty, some sold, some not. Then they got to unit 142. Snap. The door rolled up. And something about it stopped Clara's breath. It wasn't full. It wasn't chaotic. It was somehow tidy. A wooden rocking chair with peeling white paint. A few cardboard boxes stacked neatly against the back wall. A tall floor lamp with a lampshade that had once had pink flowers on it. A small cedar chest with brass hinges. And on top of one of the boxes catching the pale morning light, a chipped ceramic mug. Clara couldn't read what it said from where she was standing. But something about that mug pulled her forward one step. "All right, folks," the auctioneer said. "Estate lot, personal effects, $50 a month. 40. Mayans. 25. Come on, give me 25. Nothing. 10. Last call. $10 for the lot. We gotta clear it today." Clara's hand went up before she decided to raise it. The auctioneer's eyes found her. He blinked. He looked her up and down. 17 years old, coat too thin, suitcase at her feet. Something flickered in his face. Pity, maybe, or recognition. "Sold. To the young lady, $10. Clara walked forward. She handed him the $10. He handed her a receipt and a bright yellow padlock still in its plastic wrap. "You got till end of the month. Then it's back on the block." He moved on to the next unit. Clara stood at the open door of Unit 142 and stared inside. Just her and someone else's ghosts. She stepped inside. She rolled the door down behind her. The dark closed around her like a hand. Her phone was dead. She fumbled in her pocket and found a lighter she'd forgotten about. She flicked it. The little flame trembled. The unit was small. The air smelled like cedar and old paper and something faintly sweet. Lavender. Dried lavender. Clara walked to the first box. She sat down on the concrete floor. She pulled the tape off with her fingers. Inside, books, hard covers with soft cloth bindings, a book of poems, a cookbook with handwritten notes in the margins, a children's book of fairy tales with a torn dust jacket. She lifted the fairy tale book. She opened the cover, and she stopped breathing. Written on the inside in careful looping cursive were the words, "For my Clara, read this until you know every word by heart. Love, Grandma." The date was written underneath. 12 years ago, Clara stared at her own name, written in a hand she hadn't seen in 10 years. The lighter shook. She set the book down. Very carefully, like it might break, she opened the second box. Kitchen things, mismatched plates, a chipped ceramic mug with faded blue letters on the side. She picked up the mug. She turned it over in her hands. World's best grandma, the cheap kind, the kind you buy at a drugstore, the kind that means everything. Clara pressed the mug to her forehead. She let herself cry, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't know it was in you, the kind that shakes your shoulders and doesn't ask permission. She cried in the dark of a $10 storage unit holding a stranger's mug that wasn't a stranger's at all. She cried for a long time. Then she wiped her face with her sleeve, and she kept going. The third box was photographs, albums, loose prints. Clara opened the first album. There she was, age 2, age 3, age 4, age 5. She turned the page, age 6, age 7, and then the pictures stopped. Except they didn't. Clara turned another page. Age 8, in a school uniform she recognized, standing at a bus stop, age 9, at a soccer game, Muddy knees, age 10, at a spelling bee holding a certificate. Clara froze. She had never sent her grandmother these pictures. She had never known where her grandmother was. Then who took these? Her hands started to shake. She turned another page. Age 12, age 14, age 16. There was one from just a few months ago, Clara standing outside the coffee shop where she worked in her green apron laughing at something. Somebody had been watching her for 10 years. Clara closed the album. She put her face in her hands. She was about to give up, about to stand, about to leave. Then something made her look up. Just look up at the ceiling. The ceiling was corrugated metal, same as the walls. Dusty, cobwebbed in the corners, but right in the middle, directly above where she was sitting, there was a rectangle, small, yellow, held to the metal by a strip of gray duct tape, an envelope. Someone had taped an envelope to the ceiling of the storage unit. Someone who knew she would eventually sit down on this floor. Someone who knew she would eventually look up. Clara stood. She dragged one of the heavier boxes to the middle of the unit. She climbed onto it. She reached up. Her fingers touched the envelope. The tape was old, fused to the metal by 10 years of cold and heat. She peeled it back slowly. The envelope came free. She stepped down. She held it in both hands. There was no address, no stamp. Just one word written on the front in the same looping cursive she had seen inside the fairy tale book. Her name, Clara. She sat down on the concrete. She held the lighter close. She opened the flap. Three things fell into her lap. A small brass key on a leather cord, a business card cream color that read, Elias Callahan, attorney at law, Millbrook, and a letter, thick, folded in thirds, written on both sides of every page. Clara unfolded the pages. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then several things have happened. First, you have found a way to this unit. That means you have survived long enough and been hungry enough and brave enough to bid on a $10 box of an old woman's things. I am so sorry, my love. I am so sorry it had to be this way. Second, it means I am gone. And third, it means that the story you have been told about me is finally about to be corrected. Clara pressed her fist to her mouth. She kept reading. They told you I gave you up. I know they did. I know you have carried that around your neck for 10 years. Sweetheart, listen to me. I did not give you up. I protected you. Your father, when you were very small, made a terrible mistake. He borrowed money from a company called Ashford Holdings to save his printing business. They were not a bank. They were the other kind of lender, the kind that circles and waits. When your father could not repay, they came to me. They made threats. They said if the debt was not settled, they would take you. They would use you as collateral. I could not let them do that. So I sold my house. I paid every cent of your father's debt. And then so they would believe there was nothing left to squeeze, I disappeared. I let them think I had walked away from you. I let your father tell you the story that was easiest for a child to survive. I let you hate me, my love, because it was the only way to keep them from ever coming back for you. Every night for 10 years, I have paid for that choice, and I would make it again. I would make it 1,000 times again. Clara's whole body was shaking now. This storage unit was my insurance policy. I paid it up for years. I set it to default the month after you turned 17. I knew what your life would look like by then. I knew what she would do. I hoped that fate or grief or hunger would bring you here. It has. The key is to the front door of a small farmhouse in a town called Millbrook. The business card belongs to Mr. Callahan. He is the only person on earth besides me who knows the whole story. He has been waiting for you. The house is yours. The land is yours. Everything I had left is yours. It is not much, but it is paid for. It is safe, and it is home. Go there, Clara, please. Go home. The last paragraph was harder to read. The ink was a little smudged. Forgive me for the childhood you have had. Forgive me for the years I could not hold you. I have loved you every single day, every single hour, every single minute of every hour. Always. Your grandmother, Adeline. Clara sat on the concrete floor of Unit 142 with the letter in her lap and the mug against her chest and her grandmother's silver necklace warm against her skin. She sat there for what might have been an hour. For the first time in 31 days, she wasn't alone. The next morning, she sold the rocking chair to one of the auction men for $60. She kept the mug. She kept the books. She kept the photographs. She kept the letter and the key and the business card. At the station, she bought a bus ticket to Millbrook, $28 and change. She sat on a plastic bench and watched the clock. She held the mug in her lap. 6 hours to Millbrook, 6 hours to a house she had never seen, 6 hours to home. She got on the bus. She found a seat by the window. She watched the city she had grown up in slide past the glass and get smaller and smaller and finally disappear. For the first time in 3 weeks, she slept. Millbrook was smaller than Clara expected. One main street, a hardware store with a hand-painted sign, a post office the size of a shed, a church with a white steeple, a diner on the corner with a neon sign that said, Holloway's in soft pink letters. The pink letters were the first warm thing Clara had seen in weeks. She stopped in front of the diner. She was too tired to walk another block. She opened the door. A bell tinkled overhead. The smell hit her first. Coffee, bacon, pie crust, something with cinnamon. The woman behind the counter looked up. 60s, wide face, kind eyes, gray hair pulled back with a clip, an apron that said Holloway's across the chest. She looked at Clara. She looked at the suitcase. She looked at Clara's face. Then she said, sit down, honey. Booth by the window. Clara sat down. The woman was already pouring coffee. She brought the mug over, slid a small pitcher of cream next to it. You eat pie, she said. I'm apple or peach. I don't have apple or peach, honey. Clara swallowed. Apple. Good choice. The pie came, warm, a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting on top. Clara ate it slower than she wanted to. The woman saw anyway. When Clara was almost finished, the woman came back. She sat down across from her in the booth, just like that. I'm Wren, Clara. You looking for someone, Clara? I'm looking for a Mr. Callahan. Elias Callahan. Elias, sure. 2 blocks down. Green door. Sign says attorney. Clara nodded. You need a place to stay tonight. No, I have somewhere, meow. Wren looked at her. The look wasn't nosy. It was the look of a woman who had seen a lot of runaway girls come through her door. Okay, but you finish that pie first. Wren wouldn't take her money. Next time, first one's on the house. 2 blocks down, green door. Clara stood in front of it for a full minute. She opened the door. A bell rang. The office smelled like paper and leather. An old man looked up from behind a desk piled with folders. 76. Round wire glasses. A cardigan the color of tea. White hair on the sides. Bald on top. He saw her. He stood. He didn't move for a moment. He just stood there and looked at her. Then he said very softly, Clara. She nodded. His eyes got wet. He came around the desk. He held out his hand and Clara took it, and his hand was warm and dry and steady. I have been waiting for you, he said, for 8 months. Clara couldn't speak. Sit down, please. Sit down. He sat down across from her. He folded his hands on the desk. Your grandmother was one of the finest people I have ever known. She came to me 10 years ago. She sat in that exact chair, and she told me a plan that was the most complicated thing I had ever heard. And I have been a lawyer in this county since 1974. He smiled a little, a tired smile. I told her it wouldn't work. She told me it would. She told me the only thing she needed was a lawyer who would keep his mouth shut until a specific girl walked through his door. He looked at Clara. You are that girl. Clara made a sound she couldn't help. Mr. Callahan reached into a drawer. He pulled out a thick manila folder. The house was transferred into your name on your 16th birthday, held in trust until you turn 17. It is legally entirely and irrevocably yours." He paused. "She lived there alone, Clara, for 10 years. She fixed the roof herself. She painted the shutters. She planted lavender along the fence. She saved every card you made in second grade because your father used to send them to me and I passed them to her." Clara couldn't breathe. She died in her sleep in April, in her own bed. She was 74 years old. Clara put her face in her hands. Mr. Callahan waited. He waited a long time. When Clara could look up again, he said gently, "Would you like me to drive you out to the house?" She nodded. The drive was 6 minutes. They left the main street. They passed a field with dairy horses in it. They turned onto a gravel road. Then Mr. Callahan slowed the car. "There," he pointed. Clara looked. A driveway, long, overgrown with weeds along the edges, framed by two crooked wooden posts. At the end of the driveway, half hidden by a giant oak tree, a small white farmhouse, 2 stories, a sagging front porch, a red door. Clara stopped with breathing. Mr. Callahan drove down the driveway. Gravel crunched under the tires. He parked in front of the house. He didn't get out. "Take your time," he said. "I'll wait right here." Clara opened the door. She stepped out. The air was different here, cleaner. Cold, but not the mean city cold. A country cold that smelled like turning leaves and something faintly sweet. She walked toward the house. She climbed the 3 wooden steps. They creaked. She stood in front of the red door. She reached into her pocket. She took out the brass key. Her hand shook. She put the key in the lock. She turned it. It turned smoothly, well-oiled, recently oiled. Someone had made sure this key would turn for her. The door swung open. The smell hit her first. Cedar, lavender, something like old wood polish. She stepped inside. The entryway was small, a coat rack on the wall, a pair of women's boots, size 7, sitting neatly by the door, waiting for feet that would never come back. Clara touched the boots. She kept walking. The living room was to the right, a couch with a hand-knit blanket folded across the back, a fireplace with a framed photograph on the mantel. Clara walked to the photograph. She picked it up. A young woman was sitting in a rocking chair holding a newborn baby. Written on the back in the same looping cursive, Adeline and Clara. 2 days old. The happiest day of my life. Clara set the photograph back down, very carefully. The kitchen. A round wooden table. A blue teapot on the stove. A recipe box with index cards inside. Clara pulled out one of the cards. Clara's birthday cake, chocolate. Not too sweet. She likes it with strawberries on top. Clara had never told her grandmother she liked chocolate cake. Never told her grandmother she liked strawberries on top. But her grandmother had known anyway. She went upstairs. She opened the second door. She stopped. The room was small, a twin bed, a dresser, a rag rug on the wooden floor, a window that looked out onto the oak tree. The walls were painted a soft yellow. On the dresser, a framed drawing of a stick figure family, 3 people holding hands, in crayon. Signed it in a child's handwriting, Clara, age 5. Clara knew the drawing. She had made it in the kitchen of her grandmother's old house when she was 5 years old. She had forgotten about it entirely. Her grandmother had not. Clara sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked around, at the yellow walls, at the rag rug, at the row of things on the dresser, and she understood. Her grandmother had built her a bedroom. Her grandmother had built her a bedroom and had waited for 10 years for a girl who might never come. Clara curled up on top of the quilt. She pulled her knees to her chest, and she cried until her whole body was empty. When Clara finally came down the stairs, her eyes were red. Mr. Callahan stood up. He walked to the kitchen. On the round wooden table, he set a leather-bound book. She kept this from the day she moved in. She wrote in it almost every week, some weeks every day. She wrote to you. Clara stared at the book. She asked me to make sure you got it when you were ready. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Clara, she loved you with her whole life, not part of it, all of it, every hour of every day for 74 years. Please know that. Clara nodded because she couldn't speak. Mr. Callahan tipped his hat. He walked out. Clara sat down at the table. She opened the leather-bound book. November 3rd, Clara turned 8 today. I made her a cake and ate it alone. It was chocolate, not too sweet, with strawberries on top. February 12th, I stood behind the wall at the elementary school today. I saw her tie her own shoe. A little girl next to her said she was clumsy. I wanted to run out and hold her and tell her she was perfect. I cried the whole way home. Clara read for hours. She read until she found a photograph of herself, age 11, waiting at a bus stop in the rain, and next to the photograph in careful cursive, the words, "I bought her an umbrella. I put it in a bag. I could not give it to her. I brought it home. It is still in the hall closet." Clara stood up. She walked to the hall closet. She opened the door. On the top shelf, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a small child's umbrella, yellow, with ducks on it. Clara held the umbrella against her chest. She sank to the floor of the hallway, and she cried again. She slept that night in her grandmother's bed. She woke up in the morning with sunlight coming through the window and a mourning dove calling from the oak tree, and she was home. Wren came by on the third morning with a casserole. She knocked on the door. "Chicken and rice. Freezes good if you don't eat it all." "You didn't have to." "I know." Wren stepped inside. She looked around the kitchen. "Your grandma used to come into the diner every Sunday. Ordered the same thing every time. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, always sat in the booth by the window, always brought a book." Clara held onto the counter. "You look like her. In the eyes, around the mouth, same way of holding your shoulders." Clara couldn't speak. Wren nodded. She patted Clara's arm once quick, then let go. "You come in Sunday morning. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, on the house, and you can pay me back by keeping her seat warm." The old man from next door came by that afternoon. Cyrus Bramble, 71, thick white eyebrows, a brown Carhartt jacket, hands the size of dinner plates. "You Adeline's girl." "Yes, sir." "You know how to fix a leaky pipe." "No, sir." "You know how to split kindling." "No, sir." "You know how to tell a tomato plant from a weed." "No, sir." Cyrus made a sound in his throat that might have been a laugh. "All right, then. We got work to do." He spent the rest of the day showing Clara things. At one point, standing by the fence, he said, "Your grandpa played chess with me on Thursdays. For years, Adeline used to make him bring me a slice of pie every time." Clara stopped moving. "When your grandpa passed, Adeline started coming instead. She wasn't much good at chess. She just came, sat in his chair, drank coffee, told me stories about you." Clara turned to him. "She was proud of you, girl, in case anyone forgets to tell you." Clara sat down on the porch steps and cried. The reading in the evenings was the hardest part. Clara would come home from Wren's diner and light a lamp and open the leather book. She read chronologically. She refused to skip ahead. There were entries about the roof, entries about the garden, entries about the ache in Adeline's knees in winter, entries about the loneliness that came in waves and then receded and then came back again. But mostly there were entries about Clara. She made honor roll. My girl made honor roll. She had her first crush. His name was Todd. It didn't work out. She survived. She started working at the coffee shop. I stood across the street and watched her wipe down a table. She has her mother's hands. Clara read that entry twice. Her mother's hands. Nobody had ever told Clara she had her mother's hands. She held her own hands up in the lamplight. For the first time in her life, she saw somebody else's hands too. Somewhere in the 6th week, a car came up the driveway. Clara heard it before she saw it. She turned. A black sedan, New, waxed, wrong for the road. A man got out. 50s, silver hair, gray suit, a wristwatch that caught the sun. He smiled at her. The smile did not reach his eyes. Miss Whitmore. Yes. My name is Gerald Ashford. I represent Ashford Holdings. I wonder if I might have a few minutes of your time. Clara's blood went cold. She had read the name in the letter. Ashford, standing on her porch, in a gray suit, smiling. What do you want? I'd like to make you an offer on the property. It's not for sale. Miss Whitmore, I understand you're young. It's not for sale. Gerald Ashford's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. $380,000 cash. You could go to college. You could live comfortably for a long, long time. Clara did not answer. This place is a lot of work for a young girl. Your grandmother left you a burden as much as a gift, if we're being honest. Get off my porch. Miss Whitmore, get off my porch. He nodded, politely, slowly, like a man who had all the time in the world. You'll think about it. You're a smart girl. You will come around. He walked back to the car. Before he got in, he turned. Give my regards to whoever is helping you. Then he drove away. That night, the pipe in the back froze, which was strange because it was only October. 2 nights later, the fence in the north pasture was flat, like somebody had pushed it down. 3 nights after that, a note was slipped under Clara's front door. Sign the papers before you lose anything else. Clara stood in the entryway with the note in her hand. She sat down at the kitchen table and picked up her grandmother's leather book and turned to a random page. They came again today, 3 of them. I am 71 years old and I am not afraid of them. Because I know something they will never know. I know why I am here. Clara closed the book. She held it against her chest. She whispered, "Okay, Grandma." The next week, she went to see Josephine. Wren had told her about Josephine 3 times before Clara went. Josephine Merritt, 78, Adeline's oldest friend. The care home was small, yellow paint. Room 14. Clara knocked. A soft voice said, "Come in." The room was full of books. In the middle of the room, in an armchair by the window, sat a tiny woman, 78 years old, white hair in a bun, a knit shawl around her shoulders. She looked up. She saw Clara. Her whole face changed. "Oh, oh, my sweet lord, you have her eyes." Clara couldn't move. Josephine held out both her hands. Clara walked over, slow. Josephine took Clara's hands in hers. Her hands were cool, papery, strong. "I have been waiting to meet you for 70 years. Clara sat down on the little footstool by the armchair. "Your grandmother was my best friend from the day we started kindergarten. She came here every Sunday. For 8 years, she brought me pie from Wren's. She told me stories about you. Every Sunday, she had a new story." Clara was crying now, quietly. She would take out her wallet and show me photographs. She would say, look at her, Josie. Isn't she beautiful?" And I would say, yes. And she would cry me. Josephine reached under her armchair. She pulled out a small tin box, decorated with pink roses. She asked me to keep this for a rainy day. She said, "Josie, if she comes and things get bad and she needs a rainy day, give her this." Josephine handed Clara the box. "It's raining, isn't it, sweetheart?" Clara took the box. She opened the clasp. Inside were papers, bank statements, records, all neatly labeled in her grandmother's handwriting. Clara pulled out the top page. She read it. She read it twice. Her hands went numb. The top page was a bank statement from an offshore account. In the name of Marlene Whitmore, 6 years of monthly deposits from a shell company, which was a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary, which at the very bottom, if you traced it, was Ashford Holdings. Clara looked up at Josephine. She couldn't make her mouth work. "Sweetheart, your grandmother was the smartest woman I ever knew. Whatever they think they can hide, she found it. She spent 10 years building a wall around you out of paper." Clara looked back down at the papers. the wife of her father, the woman who had signed her school forms, the woman who had walked her to the bus, the woman who had sat next to her at the funeral, the woman who had locked the deadbolt behind her, had been paid to do it for 6 years by the same people who had killed her family. There is more in the house. She told me there was a safe. Look behind the bookshelf in the cellar. She said you would know the key I meant. Clara closed her eyes, the brass key on the leather cord in her pocket, right now. How did she know? Clara whispered. How did she know all of this? Josephine smiled a little, a sad smile, a proud smile, because she loved you. And love, sweetheart, is a kind of intelligence people underestimate. Clara went home. She went straight to the cellar. She started pulling books off the shelf. Halfway through, she saw it. The back of the bookshelf wasn't wood, it was drywall, painted to look like wood grain. Clara pushed on the drywall. It swung open, a false panel. Behind the panel was a small safe, cast iron, old, the size of a shoebox. Clara took the brass key out of her pocket. She put it in the keyhole. It turned. The safe opened. Inside were three things: a thick file folder tied with a black ribbon, a cassette tape in a plastic case labeled Ashford Meeting March 2019, and a small envelope, cream-colored, with Clara's name on the front. Clara opened the envelope first. My love, if you have opened this safe, then Josephine has done what I asked her to, which means things have gotten hard. Do not sell, do not run, do not do this alone. In this folder is every piece of evidence I gathered in 10 years, 14 other families, names, dates, contracts, witnesses. On the tape is a recorded meeting between Gerald Ashford and a woman he did not know was recording. But sweetheart, do not carry this alone. Take it to the people who have been kind to you. This is not a fight for one girl. This is a fight for a whole town that has been afraid for too long. Trust them. I love you, Grandma. Clara sat on the cellar floor. She looked at the folder. She looked at the tape. She looked at the letter. She stood up. She carried the folder and the tape upstairs. She set them on the round wooden table. She picked up the phone. She called Mr. Callahan first, then Cyrus, then Wren, then Cedar Grove, and asked them please to drive Josephine out in the morning. She said the same sentence to all of them. Can you come to the house tomorrow at noon? There is something my grandmother left for us, not for me, for us. Nobody asked what. Nobody said no. Clara opened the folder. She began to read. Outside, the wind was picking up. The oak tree scraped against the porch roof. Clara read all night. She read the names of 14 families. She read the story her grandmother had spent a decade writing in secret with nothing but coffee and patience and love. By the time the sun came up over the lavender fields, Clara Whitmore knew exactly what she was going to do. They came at noon, Wren first. She parked her old red pickup at the end of the driveway and walked up carrying 2 pies, 1 apple, 1 peach, and a thermos of coffee. Cyrus came next. He'd walked over from his farm. He carried a shotgun. Broken open, not loaded, just a signal. He set it against the wall by the door. Mr. Callahan came in his old brown sedan. He wore a tie. He carried a leather briefcase. Josephine came last. She walked slowly up the porch steps, holding a cane in one hand and a small notebook in the other. In the notebook were 50 pages of names Josephine had collected over 8 years of Sunday afternoons with Adeline. They sat down at the round wooden table. 5 chairs, 5 people. Clara sat where her grandmother used to sit, facing the window, facing the oak tree. She put the folder on the table. She put the cassette tape next to it. She looked at each face. My grandmother spent 10 years alone in this house because she was fighting a company that killed my mother and destroyed my father and would have destroyed me. She did it without anyone knowing. She did it because she thought she had to do it alone. She put her hand on the folder. She was wrong. She should have had all of you, and now I have all of you, and I'm not going to fight this alone. I'm going to fight it with my grandmother's people. The kitchen was very quiet. Then Cyrus made a sound in his throat. He nodded once, slow. Wren wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Mr. Callahan opened his legal pad. Josephine reached across the table and took Clara's hand. Tell us what she left. Tell us all of it. Clara opened the folder. She told them all of it. The 14 families, the bank accounts, Marlene, the shell companies, the dates. She told them about Wren's husband. She had to stop for that part. Wren didn't move. She sat with her hands folded on the table and her eyes on the wood grain. Very still, Claire said. He didn't kill himself because he was weak, Wren. He killed himself because they broke him. And they broke him because he had land they wanted. Wren didn't cry. Wren just closed her eyes. She sat like that for almost a full minute. Then she opened them. What do we need to do? Mr. Callahan wrote it down. Priscilla Vaughn, freelance investigative reporter. 2 counties over. She'll come. Cyrus said, town hall meeting, next Thursday, regular session. Anyone can speak in the public comment period. Josephine opened her notebook. I have the addresses for 11 of the 14 families. Wren said, I'll cook. Clara looked at all of them. Then we start. Priscilla Vaughn drove out the next morning. 36 years old, short, a denim jacket. She listened to the cassette tape in Clara's kitchen. When it was over, she said one word. Everything. What? I want everything, the folder, the tape, copies, all of it. And I want to sit down with every one of those 14 families before Thursday. Josephine started calling families on Monday. 9 said yes the first day, 2 more on Tuesday, the last 3 by Wednesday morning. 14 families, all coming to Millbrook to stand. Cyrus and his farming friends took shifts at Clara's property, 2 men at a time all night. On Tuesday night, the barn caught fire. Cyrus and his friend Marvin were in the yard. They saw the flash. They saw the man running. Marvin called the fire department. The barn burned. But the evidence didn't because Clara had already made 3 copies of the folder. Priscilla had one. Mr. Callahan had one in his office safe. The third was in a safety deposit box at the community bank in Josephine's name. Ashford had burned an empty barn. Clara stood on her porch at 3 in the morning and watched the last of the barn's frame collapse into embers. Cyrus finally said, they're scared, girl. Clara said, good. Thursday came cold and clear. The town hall was a brick building with a green door, 200 folding chairs set up in rows. Normally about 30 people came to the regular Thursday session. That morning, 300 people came. They came in trucks and old cars and on foot. They came in pairs and in families. Some of them had driven 4 hours to be there. Ashford's people were there too. Gerald Ashford came in the middle, gray suit, 2 lawyers with him. He walked in like he had walked into 1,000 rooms, calm. Clara watched him from the back. She was wearing her grandmother's cardigan, soft brown wool. She was wearing the silver leaf necklace. She was holding the leather-bound book against her chest. The mayor called the session to order. When he got to public comment, he cleared his throat. The chair recognizes Miss Clara Whitmore. The room went quiet. Clara stood up. She walked to the front of the room, slow. Her legs felt like water. She got to the little wooden podium. She set the leather book down. She saw Gerald Ashford in the front row. He smiled at her, small, confident. Clara did not smile back. My name is Clara Whitmore. I am 17 years old. My grandmother's name was Adeline Whitmore. She died in April. She lived in this town for 10 years, and most of you knew her as the quiet woman with a garden. She took a breath. She was not quiet. She was hiding. The room was very still. When I was 7 years old, my father borrowed money from a company called Ashford Holdings. When my father could not repay, they came for me. My grandmother sold her house. She paid the debt. And then, so they would believe there was nothing left, she disappeared. She let me believe she had abandoned me for 10 years so that I could survive. A woman in the third row put her hand over her mouth. During those 10 years, my grandmother did not just hide. She watched. She listened. She wrote things down. She learned that what happened to my father was not an accident. It was a business model. Ashford Holdings has been doing the same thing to families in this county for more than 20 years. She opened the folder. She took out the top page. I have here the names of 14 families in this county whose land was taken by Ashford Holdings through fraud, coercion, or worse. She read the names slowly. Every name. She read the name of Wren's husband. Wren sat very still with her hands folded. She read the name of a farmer whose widow was sitting in the fifth row. The widow bent forward and pressed her forehead to the chair in front of her. 12 names, and Gerald Ashford's lawyer stood up. Point of order. This is not a legal proceeding. Cyrus stood up, 71 years old, 6'2" in his boots. He said one word, sit. The lawyer looked at him. Cyrus did not move. The lawyer sat. Clara finished the names. She looked up. I have documents. I have bank records. I have a recording of Gerald Ashford himself from 3 years ago, discussing the pattern with a woman he did not know was recording him. She held up the cassette tape. Gerald Ashford's smile finally faltered. Just for a second, Clara saw it. I also have this. She opened the leather book. She turned to a page she had marked. This is my grandmother's journal. On March 11th, 2019, she wrote this. They came again. The one in the gray suit, Ashford himself. He sat on my porch and drank my tea and told me he could make me rich. I told him I was rich already. He asked me how. I told him I had a granddaughter. He did not know what to do with that answer. Clara looked up. She looked at Gerald Ashford. You came to her porch. You drank her tea. You asked her to sell my future to you. She said no. She said no for 10 years. She said no until the day she died. Clara's voice broke, but she kept going. And I am here to say no too, not just for me, for every family in this room who has said no in a whisper alone in the dark. This town is going to say no together, out loud. The room was silent. Then the widow in the fifth row stood up. My husband said no. In 2011, they took the farm anyway. An old man in the back stood up. My brother said no. In 2007, he is buried in the churchyard down the road. A woman near the door stood up. My father signed the papers. He told me it was because he was tired. He was not tired. He was scared. I am tired of being scared. One by one, 14 families. They stood, they spoke, they named the dates and the deals and the dead. The room listened. Nobody sat down until every family had spoken. By the end, the mayor was crying openly at the front table. Gerald Ashford sat in the front row and did not move. His lawyers whispered to him. He did not answer them. He was looking at Clara, and in his eyes for the first time was something like fear. Then in the very back of the room, an old woman stood up. She was 81 years old, small, silver hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a plain navy dress and a coat too heavy for the room. She stood slowly. She used a cane. Nobody knew who she was. Clara didn't know who she was. Gerald Ashford turned. He saw her. All the color drained from his face. Mother, he whispered. The old woman's name was Nora Ashford. She had lived quietly in a house 40 miles away for the last 12 years. She had not seen her son in 8 of them. She had read Priscilla Vaughn's first article that morning. Priscilla had published it online at 6 a.m. as a warm-up piece before the town hall. Nora Ashford had read that article 3 times. Then she had put on her coat. She had driven her old Buick to Millbrook. She had come alone. She held up something in her hand, a small notebook, brown leather, battered. My late husband kept this. He was a bookkeeper, a quiet man. He worked for our son's company for 4 years until he had a stroke in 2016. Before the stroke, he wrote things down. Things he had seen, things he could not say out loud. She looked at Gerald. I found this in his desk after he passed. I have been reading it for 6 years. I did not know what to do with it. I did not know if I was allowed to hate my own son. Her voice was very quiet, but every person in the room heard it. I know now. I am allowed. She walked slowly up the center aisle. She held the notebook out to Clara. Sweetheart, this will help you. Clara took the notebook. Nora Ashford turned. She looked at her son. She said, I am so sorry, Gerald. I was your mother. I should have raised a better man. Then she walked back down the aisle, slowly, using her cane. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. She sat down in her seat in the back. Gerald Ashford stood up. His face was white. He walked toward the back of the room. His lawyers followed. At the door he paused. He turned around. He looked at Clara across the room. Then he walked out. Priscilla was writing so fast her hand was cramping. The photographer was taking pictures. The live stream had over 4,000 viewers. Something was breaking in Millbrook. Clara closed the leather book. She held it against her chest. My grandmother said no for 10 years alone. Now we say no together. She sat down. The room stood up. Every person in the town hall stood up. They stood for a long time. Nobody clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter than clapping, deeper. The immediate aftermath of the town hall was simpler than anyone expected. Nothing dramatic happened outside. No sirens, no arrests. That would come later. State Attorney General's office opening a formal investigation 3 weeks later. Federal money laundering inquiry starting up 4 months after that. Ashford Holdings assets frozen the following spring. Marlene arrested on charges of criminal conspiracy in June. Gerald Ashford indicted in September on 27 counts. But that afternoon, people just stood in the parking lot. They talked. They cried. They hugged strangers who had turned out to have known their fathers. Clara found Josephine still sitting in her chair. Clara knelt down in front of her. Josephine touched her cheek. Your grandmother saw this somewhere, somehow. She saw you today. Clara nodded because she could not speak. She would say she was proud of you. I know. She would say she loved you. I know that too. Josephine smiled. Good, because that's the only thing that ever mattered. That night back at the farmhouse, Clara sat on the porch alone. The oak tree rustled. The stars were coming out. She had a mug of tea in her hands. The mug said, World's Best Grandma in faded blue letters. Clara looked at it for a long time. Then she said very quietly to no one, Thank you. The lavender fields moved in the dark like they were answering. A year passed. A year is a long time. A year is enough time for a barn to be rebuilt with help from every man in Cyrus's church. A year is enough time for peeling paint to be scraped off. A year is enough time for lavender to spread past the fence into a small hillside that turned purple in June. A year is enough time for a story to travel. Priscilla Vaughn's first article was picked up by a national wire service 2 weeks after it ran. By the following month, 3 television reporters had driven to Millbrook to try to interview Clara. Clara said no, not because she was angry, because the story was not hers. It was her grandmother's. It was 14 families. It was Josephine's. It was Wren's dead husband's. Clara let Priscilla be the voice. Priscilla wrote a book about it later. Clara asked for one thing in return, a percentage of the royalties to go to a small nonprofit Clara was starting. A small nonprofit that ran out of a farmhouse on 4 acres in Millbrook. A small nonprofit called Adeline's Porch. Adeline's Porch was not a shelter. It was not a foster home. It was something in between. The idea was simple. Older women in Millbrook who lived alone came on Sunday afternoons. They brought knitting. They brought stories. They sat on the porch in mismatched chairs and they talked, or they didn't talk, or they read out loud from whatever book was on the coffee table. At the same time on the same Sundays, children who were in the foster system in the county came out for the afternoon. A social worker named Beatrix would drive them out in a small van. The children were between 5 and 12. Some of them had been moved 4 or 5 times. Some of them didn't talk much. They sat on the porch too. They ate pie with the older women. Josephine had a favorite trick where she would start reading a book, then pause, then hand it to a child, then say, "You take over, my eyes are tired." The child would take over. Nobody corrected them. By spring, Adeline's porch had 6 regular older women. By summer, 11. By fall, 18. Nora Ashford, aged 81, was one of them. She started coming after the trial began. She sat in a rocking chair on the far end of the porch, and she knit. She was making a scarf. It was the ugliest scarf Clara had ever seen, purple and orange and green in stripes. Clara brought her tea every time she came. Nora finished her scarf in November. She gave it to a 9-year-old boy named Malcolm, who had been coming to Adeline's porch for 6 weeks. Malcolm had been in the foster system for 3 years. He didn't smile much. Nora put the scarf around his neck. "It's warm. It's ugly, but it's warm." Malcolm laughed. It was the first time any of the women had heard Malcolm laugh. Nora started coming every Sunday after that. She started knitting scarves for every child. By December, 6 children had ugly, beautiful scarves in purple and orange and green stripes. By January, 10 did. Nora Ashford, whose son had spent 20 years hurting people in that county, was at 81 quietly trying to atone for it, one scarf at a time. Clara let her. Because atonement Clara had learned was not a thing you gave or refused to give. It was a thing a person had to build for themselves. All you could do was leave the porch light on. Clara turned 18 and a half on a Sunday. Wren made a cake, chocolate, not too sweet, strawberries on top. It was the same cake her grandmother had made every year for a girl who wasn't there. Clara ate 2 slices. She sat on the porch that evening. The Sunday visitors had gone home. The porch was empty except for a lamp Mr. Callahan had installed. Clara turned it on every night at dusk and turned it off every morning at dawn. She had gotten into the habit of leaving it on all night, just in case someone was walking down the road who needed to see a light. She sat in her grandmother's rocking chair, the one she had bought back from the auction man for $200, 3 months after she moved to Millbrook. Clara rocked slowly. The oak tree was bare. It was late fall again. The circle had come around. Clara had the leather journal in her lap. She had read every page. She had read some pages 10 times. She had read the last page 100 times. The last page was short, dated 3 weeks before Adeline died. "My love, I am tired today, not sad, just tired. Josie says I am 74 and I am allowed to be tired. I want to write down one thing today. In case you get to this page and I am not here to say it. You were never alone, you did not know it, but you were not. I was there when you turned 5. I was there when you turned 8. I was there when you turned 12. I was there when you turned 16. I was there behind walls and behind windows and behind trees. You were never alone. I could not hold you, but I loved you like I was holding you, every second, every day. And if you are reading this now, I need you to know one more thing. You are still not alone. You never will be, because the love did not go away when I did. Love does not do that. Love stays. Love keeps working. Love shows up as other people, as a woman who brings you pie, as an old man who teaches you to split kindling. Love does not stop, my Clara. Love finds a way, even when the person is gone, even when the mouth cannot say the words anymore. Love finds a way. You are loved. You will always be loved. Grandma, Clara closed the book. She looked out at the lavender fields. They were bare now, just brown stalks. But she knew what was underneath. She knew what would come back in June. She rocked slowly. She thought about a Tuesday in October 2 years ago now, when she had been 17 and homeless and standing on a porch with $55 in her pocket. She thought about how sure she had been that nobody in the world was going to come for her. She thought about how wrong she had been. She thought about the woman who had come for her quietly decades in advance without ever getting to hold her hand. She thought about all the pies, all the boots, all the umbrellas and closets, all the mugs, all the scarves, all the small, patient, quiet acts of love that fill up the world when you finally learn to see them. Clara stood up. She walked to the edge of the porch. She looked at the sky. The first star was out. She said softly, "Good night, Grandma." The oak tree rustled. The lavender fields shifted. Somewhere in the house, a floor creaked. Old wood settling. Clara smiled a little. She went inside. She left the porch light on because someone might be walking down the road tonight. Someone who was 17 and cold and out of options. Someone who needed to see a light. Someone who needed to know that she was not alone, that she never had been. That love in the end always finds a way home. The end.